All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Joe Saz of BLOCKTV, coming in with Anthony Lusardi to discuss a number of things regarding Ethereum Classic. And we're just kind of setting up here, so give me a sec. All right. And I'm just going to throw this link up on Twitter real quick.
All right. Hey,
All
Joe.
right. Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So, all right. All right. I think I'm almost ready to go. How are you doing?
Doing good.
All
No
right.
complaints.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So I didn't really have too specific of an agenda, as far as things to run down the list. I felt like you were the most qualified person to kind of decide what we talk about first, what's most important, and just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
I think the number one thing, and I'm assuming people will be joining at some point to comment, but the first thing that a lot of people that I found were most curious about was the 51% attack or the reorg attack, or I think there's like confusion as to what exactly that was. Actually, you know what? Let's start with an introduction. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Anthony. I've been involved in ETC since the start. Prior to that,
When was the start?
the start was in June or July of 2016 was the hard fork that officially split us off into two different networks, or block 1.92 million if you're measuring it on the time chain. Um, Yeah, I was involved just as an enthusiast in Ethereum and Bitcoin back then. And, I thought Ethereum was pretty cool. Obviously, I was new to the space at that time and learned a lot since then. But basically, I've just been involved in ETC since the start. And over the past year or so, I worked full time on it at the ETC Cooperative.
Now, am I mistaken in saying I saw something about a change in that? I
Yeah,
thought I just saw you tweet something like last night even.
yeah, it was yesterday. I ended up resigning. That had nothing to do with ETC or the ETC cooperative. The ETC blockchain is great, and the ETC cooperative is doing a lot of great work. But my role in particular was it had a lot of social media focus, and that's just not something that fits well for me. Um, Over the past 3 years or so, I've had some really thick skin with dealing with that, but I
Mm.
kind of just lost it. And it's not. Yeah, I saw over the past few months that the way I was behaving wasn't me, and I didn't like it. So I decided, it's time to move on. And there's plenty of people around to pick up the work and do the things I was doing. So I'm more than happy with that transition.
Yeah, well, I think everyone in the space knows that crypto Twitter can bring out the worst in you.
Yeah.
Like not you, but everyone. It's a
No, it can
constant
definitely bring out
battleground.
the worst in me.
It's what?
It can definitely bring out the worst in me.
Yeah, I could tell you, I'm a pretty, especially earlier on, I was a much more aggressive Bitcoin maximalist. And that's also a question that I always ask people that are, in other coins. Like, are you like a ETC maximalist equivalent, or are you a multi-coiner, or kind of? I like to ask that to people in different communities.
Yeah, it's hard to pick a label for myself. I would consider myself a crypto fundamentalist.
Mhm.
So I'm all about any cryptocurrency that follows the at least the overwhelming majority of Bitcoin style of beliefs, in that things are immutable, things are permissionless, things should require some sort of just rough consensus where your consensus is you running the node and you having your own sovereign say over what you consider to be Bitcoin or not Bitcoin.
Uh-huh.
In a lot of those ways, and I think that it's not terrible to be a Bitcoin maximalist, but I feel sometimes that this idea of the crypto fundamentals needs to be exported as much as possible before people understand the importance of something like Bitcoin. And otherwise, I have a feeling that we're going to continually lose that. In that, if people don't understand why we use proof of work instead of proof of stake, then eventually everything's going to be proof of stake or everything's going to be BFT, and everybody's going to forget that adding proof of work to a cryptocurrency to create a cryptocurrency or some sort of scarce type of asset is the whole invention here. The rest of the stuff isn't exactly new. I think there's some validity to other types and styles of networks, but I think it's really important to communicate that type of thing. So yeah, I'm a crypto fundamentalist, if you can consider that a term.
Yeah, I think you and I agree in the sense there that there are the reason why Bitcoin exists, it was not to print money and to get rich, right? And so when in this space is filled, oversaturated with that goal, so I think on a fundamental level, you and I are going to agree in saying that, yeah, that's not what crypto's here to do, right? People that are trying to do that I call them enemies. So, anyway.
Well, all right. So I was originally one of those people because I didn't have noble beginnings when I started getting involved in crypto. In early 2015, I was just buying Dogecoin and Redcoin and Aurora Coin and thinking, hey, the price is going to eventually go back up and I could just flip it and sell it to everybody.
Yeah.
In 2016 is when I got more serious and started actually learning more about the importance of this stuff. So I think bringing those people are going to come anyway for the money, and it's just part of the onboarding process. Like if you're here for the money, I would love to be able to convince you to stay for other reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The money is the gateway drug for sure. My first contact was a money. Like my friend was like, "Yo, dude, it's 2015. Buy some Bitcoin, 250, 260 bucks, and then move it to this exchange and buy this altcoin. It's valued at fractions of a penny, but man, it's gonna be worth 10, 15 bucks. You buy 100,000 of it right now for nothing." And I just remember going through all that. So yeah, look. So there's a couple things that I wanted to hit that since you've been talking. It seems like one of the fundamental reasons why you're pro ETC. Does that make you anti Ethereum? Do you believe Ethereum is like centralized? You think Vitalik has too much power? Like what kind of fundamental reasons was there a divergence from Ethereum? Like other than right now, we'll hit centralization. Is that a concern to you? And then let's move on to proof of work versus proof of stake.
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider myself an opponent of Ethereum. I'm very much friends with a good deal of people on what you would call the Ethereum side. I think that's important. I think it's a better way to share my ideas with people is by befriending them and working with them. And in general, like everybody wants the same goals. Everybody wants this money that nobody else can control, or these contracts that nobody else can influence when they're between, say me and you. But everybody has different ways of going about it. I honestly think other ways that aren't proof of work are wrong or aren't going to be as effective at being decentralized as a proof of work chain. And decentralized for what I mean by it, not what other people mean by it. I don't think node counts too much towards decentralization, for example. Or not exactly, but it's too hard to explain quickly. But no, in general, I have my disagreements with people, but there's a famous quote that goes something like, "I've never, known politics to determine whether or not I'm friends with somebody." So that's kind of more of what I've been trying to bring to the space is, more just cross communicating, because even when you talk to people on the Ethereum side, and you're just calm and measured, you go, well, what about proof of stake has an issue where essentially anybody can make up a proof of stake chain and convince everybody else that it works, whereas proof of work, you can't do that as long as you're following the objective rules. And they go, oh, well, that's interesting, we haven't really thought about that. And that's a lot of design considerations that what people who are working on proof of stake seem to have issues with. So I probably got a little off topic there, but yeah, I don't consider anybody particularly my enemy, except for a couple of the more shilly groups.
Oh yeah, well, to me, like I would love to count Craig Wright as one of my enemies. He's someone that's proudly on my list. But yeah, so let's kind of talk, proof of stake. Like, what's proof of stake? We all right, everyone. I think more people know what proof of work is. So, do you want to give us like a quick rundown of proof of work? Just like I'm pretty sure you can do it in a paragraph.
Yeah, proof of work. A bunch of computers guess numbers, and when a computer guesses the right number, they get to create a block and include transactions in the block. And because your computer is on and guessing numbers, people are able to go and easily verify that your computer was actually doing that work. And that's why it's called proof of work. It actually is a technology that goes back to email, where to cut down on spam, a lot of email providers require that your computer do a little bit of work like this, very similar to this. And if your computer does the work, then the email goes through. And that cut down on spam for email substantially, because if you're sending 1 or 2 emails, it takes your computer, a fraction of a second to do it. But if you want to send a billion spam emails, it's going to slow down your computer, because each and every one of those is a fraction of a second. And that's proof of work. It essentially makes sure that you're actually doing the work, much like gold mining. You're digging down, getting the gold, and the proof that the gold is real is that you've actually obtained it. Yeah.
And on top of that, I think a lot of people need to understand that proof of work also creates a market space where the person mining has to sell in order to feed their expenses. You can't just perpetually mine and accumulate without paying off electricity bills, hardware bills, etc. Mining has a specific design where in order to profit, you need to sell. You have to. In order to keep your operations, your doors open, you need to sell. So I do believe that that's one of the strongest points for proof of work as well, in that you can't just perpetually accumulate, you can't own a massive supply like 100 billion pre-mined XRP or XLM type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, now moving on to proof of stake, I think that's a little. It's easy to. I think it's easy to understand, but it also has like some obscurities. Do you want to hit that one real quick? Just enlighten us.
So proof of stake, in much what you were saying, mining uses actual real-world resources. Mining uses actual electricity. It uses actual hardware and a lot of other things to do what it does. In proof of stake, it kind of virtualizes that, and rather than using real-world things, you use things from within the system itself. So on Ethereum, when they go proof of stake, they're going to use Ethereum as that one scarce resource. And that's not being entirely fair, because they do need to actually run servers and that type of thing. But overwhelmingly, a good 95% of that scarce resource is going to be the Ethereum itself. And that generally creates some issues, because if you have a lot of Ethereum, then for relatively low cost compared to proof of work mining, you can make more Ethereum. And that's very attractive to people who are looking at these things, because obviously they get a better ROI. But the issue with that is that it decreases decentralization, because it creates less economic pressure on the people who are doing this, whereas proof of work has substantial economic pressure. And that's more important for keeping a well-functioning market. You see right now with the US, there's no economic pressure on issuance of currency at all. and it leads to rapid devaluation of our money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the fear with proof of stake is that that same type of thing is going to happen. That remains
So,
to be seen in the new coming proof of stake algorithms, but that's my own personal belief.
so for some basic questions here, in proof of stake, do you need to run some sort of node, or do you need to just throw up your stake and put it somewhere, some magical land, and you get a return on that?
It depends on the algorithm.
So let's just talk Ethereum.
On Ethereum, you need to run, at least their current designs, from what I understand, you need to run servers. And none of this is solidified yet,
Okay.
the Ethereum proof of stake proposal, but you need to run servers for Ethereum. And you need to do, what they're saying is a fair amount of processing. Best I can tell is you'd probably be spending maybe $40 to $100 a month on a VPS node.
Okay.
Which, if that's the staking requirement, then it's really not that much. Hopefully, they find a way to up that, but then you're essentially back at proof of work anyway.
Okay, so there's a requirement, like some sort of hardware requirement, and then you stake what Ethereum you can, which obviously if you have a lot more money, you can stake a lot more and get more return on your stake. And
Yeah,
that's the centralizing pathway that you were discussing.
yeah,
And interesting. All right, so we have proof of work versus proof of stake. Now, Ethereum Classic is all right, so it made a pretty big, well, so let's hear it from you. Like, did they make a mistake by recycling the algorithm? Like, could they have done something different? Should they have done something different? Let's start talking that 51% attack. Or
yeah.
what was it? What was it? Was it a reorg? Like, is there a difference? Let's hit those.
Okay, so I don't know if it was a mistake to stay on the same algorithm as Ethereum. Uh, I'm for generally keeping as much consensus as possible without changing things too much. I'm hoping that as ETC and all other cryptocurrencies go on, they become harder and harder to change. Um,
Uh-huh.
in in general, it would be good to be on your own algorithm, but okay. So here's the thing. Right now, when you're a GPU mined algorithm, and say you even have your own algorithm, like your Ubiq, and you went and made your own version of ET hash by changing a small little thing, you're still a minority chain on GPU hardware, because it is trivial to go from mining Ethereum to mining Ubiq or mining ETC or another cryptocurrency. It's trivial to go mine Monero with the same exact GPUs you were just mining ETH with.
Uh-huh.
So in that case, you should always look at the hardware type. You're either majority on your ASIC or you're majority on your GPU
Okay.
type. And that's it for majority change. So even if ETC had changed its hashing algorithm, it probably wouldn't have changed too much, other than there's a slight reduction in friction for people who want to launch 51% attacks or reorgs.
Okay, so it wouldn't have made much of a difference had they done that.
No, not at all.
So, because the overall issue is output hash.
Yeah, the overall issue is output, potential maximum output for whatever the hardware type is.
Uh-huh.
So if you're GPU mined, it's the whole set of GPUs. If you're ASIC mined, it's the ASICs that can mine your algorithm because they're better than GPUs.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
So what happened? Like, so my understanding, and I think the understanding of a lot of people in the space was, since they didn't change the algorithm, Ethereum miners or people with Ethereum hardware were able to just quickly transition to mining Ethereum Classic and then attack. Is that oversimplifying it? Is there something that should be added to that?
Yeah, so there's some things that should be added to that. It is trivial to go and shift your hardware to launch the attack, but the attack itself isn't exactly trivial. So the first thing that happens that really made this possible is exchanges are trusting deposits with very little confirmations relative to the total, you could call it economic security of the network. So, for example, right now, Bitcoin, it's probably about $4,000. And so it costs a substantial amount of money, probably close to $50,000 at the maximum to mine a Bitcoin block at break-even costs. So if you're depositing, say, several $1,000,000 to an exchange, and they're waiting three Bitcoin blocks to confirm this, and you can mine 4 at $200,000, well, you could get your several $1,000,000 worth of Bitcoin back for a relatively low expense, and do your double spend. And that's what happened with ETC. You know, exchanges were trusting 100 confirmations or so. And at the time, if you had the hardware, this could be anywhere from $1,500 to maybe $3,000. I forget the exact numbers at the time, in order to mine these blocks and get your money back. So if you had deposited a couple $100,000 to an exchange, you can spend 1% of that and double your money. That's a pretty great deal. So, yeah. So that's one of the main things where the risk return was way outsized towards the return side. And kind of like you see in proof of work tries to, within the network itself, finds a kind of natural equilibrium for that. And exchanges just kind of ignored it, you know, said this is bad UX or there's these other issues. And that's what really allows double spends to happen, when exchanges are trusting a fairly sizable amount of money without, you know, making sure that the right amount of work was put into it. And that's one thing that we've been working and communicating with them now to do that. And then we've been also working on ways to do defensive mining so that we could follow the rules and mine a minority chain to get it ahead of an attacker chain, kind of like, you know, with nuclear weapons, how there's the mutually assured destruction type of thing. And then on top of that, you know, exchanges need to improve UX. There's no reason to not credit deposits right away for any cryptocurrency. You just wait. You just don't allow withdrawals until they're properly confirmed.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things there, but it's really not the fault of a proof of work network, because a proof of work network does never gets 51% attacked, never gets double spent. The longest chain always, by consensus rules, has no double spends in it. The only people that get double spent are those receiving transactions, and that's the type of thing that, you know, we're trying to help people, particularly large exchanges, try and mitigate that, try and better understand the situations that they're working in.
So we got, ETC got 51% attacked. This was not long after it hit Coinbase. Do you know? All right, and when you were talking, there was $1,500 to $3,000 an hour. Now, or what was the time frame for that amount of money?
For the size of the reorgs were about 100 to 130 blocks, maybe 118 or something at the largest reorg that we saw. And that's basically the cost in electricity that it would have probably cost you to mine that. If you had the hardware. If you didn't have the hardware and had to go out and buy it, or had to pay more money to rent it, then it would have cost a bit more, but just have raw costs for simple purposes. That's probably what it would have cost.
So overall cost was like $1,500 to $3,000. It wasn't like $1,500 to $3,000 an hour a day or something like that.
Yeah, no, not an hour a day. So 51% attacking the chain probably costs about $50,000 or $60,000 a day right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that you were talking about like the price per amount of blocks or something. So, you know, there was something that interesting that happened, right? A lot of people think that a 51% attack and a double spend is like a humongous nuke to a cryptocurrency. Oh. Now, Ethereum survived. Ethereum Classic survived. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Almost nobody's funds were affected other than those trusting deposits with way too little security. You know, if say, for example, I hear a small bank that I don't do anything with gets robbed, and the bank in this case is the exchange, but my exchange that trusts the same type of money is doing just fine, then I'm not really concerned. When you saw that other cryptocurrencies got 51% attacked and they absolutely tanked, like Bitcoin Gold and stuff. Bitcoin Gold wasn't on any serious exchanges. In a lot of cases, when these cryptocurrencies got 51% attacked, they were on the one exchange that got 51% attacked, and it wasn't people abandoning the cryptocurrency so much as it was abandoning the exchange. And it wasn't, same thing
Mm,
with the Dow fork too. People generally don't care if the money isn't theirs. That in this particular case happens to also be the rational answer, but it's possible to reach rational answers through irrational means, and that's just one of the ways that I think that 51% attacks don't actually matter that much to the majority of people.
yeah, that's a really interesting point, right? Because like in proof of work, everyone's fearing the 51% attack, and it
Mhm.
happened, and there was little to no downside activity as a result. Like, I mean, relative to the FUD surrounding such an issue, most people, like I said, fear it worse than they fear vampires in the middle of the night, or a ghost, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like in this space, a 51% attack, me coming into it, as a, let's just call me a newcomer and kind of, fresh to the space or something. The first thing I find out is that there are vulnerabilities known as 51% attacks, and they're bad. And you don't really know how bad they are. You just know that, all right, everything else is good except for these potential threats or vulnerabilities. And one happened, and there was such little negative impact as a result. I thought Ethereum Classic was done at first. The second I saw that headline, I was like, it's getting wiped.
Mhm.
But nothing happened. And
Yeah.
that's, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I agree 100%. I was honestly a bit concerned. Like I had my theories on what would happen, but didn't know until we empirically proved it. So
Mhm.
happy ETC was able to empirically prove that it doesn't all it doesn't kill cryptocurrency. What kills the cryptocurrencies are other things, are developers leaving or nobody maintaining the chain anymore. Those are the types of things that actually kill cryptocurrencies. And ETC was also well poised to absorb such an attack. I mean, we're always in the top 10 by volume across
Mhm.
all cryptocurrencies, and yeah, did well.
Yeah, yeah, it did. Like that's an interesting test to survive. Now, and that kind of opens the door to, will this happen again, and what will happen the second time? Is that a concern to you? All kinds of things. Is the hash still so low that it's worth 50 grand to double spend? Are exchanges stepping up their confirmations so that they can prevent this? What measures are being done to prevent this? Is it in the back of your head that this is on the table still, a 51% attack? Is there anything like that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I'm not. So I'm cautiously concerned about it in that uh, I'm not very concerned because we've convinced the majority of exchanges to up their confirmations, and I'm trying to actually convince a lot of exchanges to up them more, much to a lot of people being annoyed at me because it kills UX in the short term.
So
Uh,
you're basically saying, like, like six blocks or something transactions, and it just means that if I wanted to move my ATC from Coinbase, because I hashtag delete Coinbase and I move everything to Bittrex, and I want to keep trading, well, unfortunately, it's going to take me hours instead of minutes. Is that kind of what you're talking about as far as UX?
yeah, basically. Well, right now, a lot of exchanges wait to even credit your deposits until they've fully confirmed. And what we're trying to do is convince exchanges to one, increase, or what I'm trying to do is one, increase your confirmations substantially, uh, and two, don't don't suspend deposits, suspend withdrawals until they're fully confirmed, because you only need to prevent people taking their money out to prevent double spends.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just the way this is. Like even like on any cryptocurrency, you have a certain amount of money that you can be fairly sure is not going to go away because it costs too much to reverse it. because a lot of people speak theoretically, like if anybody has 51% of a cryptocurrency's hash rate, then yes, theoretically, without any time constraints, without any money constraints, without any number of substantial considerations, with zero risk, you could roll back any chain to Genesis block, to the first block, and undo every transaction and get all your money back on everything you want. But in real practical terms, that's just not how it works. If somebody sends you, you know, 1 Bitcoin, you could probably trust that after a block, or I would maybe wait 2 blocks just in case the network disagrees and there's a small reorg.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody sends you 1,000 Bitcoin, you know, each of those blocks costs probably close to 12.5 Bitcoin to mine, maybe a little bit less because of profitability. But that means that your 1,000 Bitcoin that you've just been sent is not secure after one confirmation. You need to wait more. Like, that's just the way it works.
Well, let me ask you this. So say you know what you propose happens and you want exchanges to prevent the withdrawal of ETC, but allow immediate transfer, right? Well, let's say, will someone be able to trade ETC on the spot? They receive their ETC. Like, what's to say that they won't sell it? Is that the equivalent to you as withdrawing it? Like, do you want them to be able to see that their ETC has made it into their portfolio, but they can't trade it yet? Or are they just like, because you know, withdrawing is the workaround would be, oh, well, I'll just trade out this ETC for, you know, whatever else, and move my money. Is that something that would be addressed in the prevention of withdrawal, immediate withdrawal?
Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe I didn't explain that well, but like uh, on a lot of fiat exchanges, for example, if you deposited $100 to buy some Bitcoin,
Uh-huh.
uh, they will let you trade that $100 immediately for Bitcoin and not be able to take out your Bitcoin until your actual cash deposit made it into their bank account.
Okay.
So same type of thing. You could deposit your ETC, trade it for Bitcoin, and then you're not able to take that Bitcoin out until there's enough confirmations.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's just, you know, how proof of work works. And obviously, the risk is higher for chains that are minority on their particular hardware, so that are the minority on GPUs, or are minority on a specific ASIC algorithm. So there's definitely some more risk there that needs to be properly managed, but that's just the name of this game, and that's how proof of work works. And it's still the best system we have because other systems are more easily revertible. The only difference is they haven't done that yet.
Okay. So I'm trying to think of a hypothetical. Did you want to keep going down that train of thought?
No, I'm good. Or
Okay.
I like to say is cryptocurrencies can be 51% attacked, but or proof of work can be 51% attacked, but other consensus algorithms can be 1% attacked. So I'd rather be attacked by 51%. I'd rather it require 51% to attack my chain than 1%.
You know, while we're here on 51% attacks, all right, 51% attack allowed for a double spend, right? That's kind of one of the main concerns. Is there any concern about in Bitcoin, if someone hijacked the hash, let's say China, in the night went to all these mining pools and mining facilities, controlled, you know, all this hash silently without any word getting to the outside world, would they be able to implement any sort of protocol change, like a Bitcoin improvement proposal? Would they be able to backdoor something like that in a 51% attack, or is a 51% attack a specific exploit to the double spend issue?
Only the double spend issue. Miners have no control over the consensus of the network.
Okay.
That's a fallacy, still perpetuated by BSV and a bunch of other cryptocurrencies that just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, so a 51% attack is only specific to the double spend. And thank you for clarifying that. That was actually that's some FUD that
Yeah.
goes around. I've been in discussions where that gets brought up, and I just can't see it happening for numerous reasons, but on a technical level, it's nice to know that there's a blanket of security there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No change to consensus rules. Also, another misconception that I hear, even from developers on cryptocurrency networks, is the idea that if somebody can controls 51% of the hash rate, that they can do anything with your cryptocurrency. That's just not true.
Uh-huh.
The only money they can double spend is their own. Uh, for anybody listening, it's kind of similar to if you were to write a good check, say for $100 at the supermarket back in the 90s,
Uh-huh.
then go run to your bank before they've deposited it and take the $100 out of your bank. Uh, that's the same type of thing there, and it wouldn't affect anybody else at the bank. It wouldn't affect anybody else's physical cash in their wallet. It would just affect the person who had traded, some groceries for that $100, and now they're out of the $100 and they don't have the groceries.
That's an excellent analogy. That's probably the best way that I've heard someone put it in the most simple form. I'm going to recycle that one if you don't mind.
Yeah, please
Uh,
reuse.
yeah, that's a great way to explain it. So, what's now you've kind of stepped back from your position in ETC, but you're still very much present in that community. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love ETC.
Okay, and let's see here. So you're still tightly ingrained in ETC. What's the future looking like? On a fundamental level, it's still, I think, especially as Ethereum is moving toward its proof of stake area. Like, what do you think? Do you think there's, Ethereum Classic is a better application of currency? Let's talk about some of those things in your opinion, make Ethereum Classic, amazing or the best or whatever you want to call it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Ladies and gentlemen, we might have a little bit of a freeze situation here. If you're in the comments and you want to say anything, please feel free to do so. I'll be answering any questions in this downtime. Oh, okay. So you can't hear me. Screen froze. Hey, can you
All
hear me now?
right.
We're
Yeah, I
back.
can hear you now. Yeah,
Cool. All right.
so I believe your question was, where is ETC going? Yeah,
Yeah, I think
so
I threw like 10 questions at you at once.
I think I heard the first one. So ETC is, doing well. We have quite a lot of development going on. In particular, we're just focusing on, improving tooling, making it easier for developers to use ETC. Right now, programming on any blockchain that has smart contracts, in case you guys can hear me. Uh,
I
Essential improvements coming from ETC Labs Core, where they're planning on bringing more efficiency to the EVM. From what I'm hearing from them, they can make it about 3 to 4 times more efficient, which would be amazing for making sure that there's no sync issues or that type of thing, which ETC doesn't have at the moment. Actually, segue into one of my personal proposals is to reduce ETC's total gas limit from 8 million to 1 million to ensure that the blockchain grows far more linearly than the 8 million gas limit does, because 8 million right now just creates a kind of parabolic growth that makes syncing harder and harder. But we should be able to address that. And yeah, there's just a lot more work going on. ETC Cooperative itself, we just got into ETC's data into Google BigQuery. So any data analysts who want to look at ETC's data and compare kind of how a ton of coins that started from a pre-mine evolved across 2 networks, I think is just really interesting. Something you don't really get the chance to do much, and there's definitely differently. And we've been funding Project Orly slash Kadi to have a better test net for developers, just so that it's much easier. Proof of work test nets are kind of great for testing out actual changes to the cryptocurrency, actual soft or hard forks, but not so much for testing out smart contracts. So, improving there. And yeah, we're just trying to have a bigger presence in crypto in general. We're going to a lot more conferences, ETC Co-op in particular. We're sending, for example, my coworker and friend Yaz to Australia in a few weeks to go to EdCon and, just preach the good word of ETC out there.
So
Yeah.
let me jump in there. All right, so there are growing concerns in the community about what's happening with Ethereum, right? And if Ethereum falls apart, then ERC20 tokens all collapse alongside it, correct?
Uh, yeah, somewhat. I mean, it would definitely be painful. I don't know if they would completely collapse because every ERC20 is essentially a centralized token, or nearly every single one is. You can just up and move your ledger
Oh, okay.
if you really need to. But I would imagine it would be substantially painful, and that there wouldn't be zero collateral. There would be a lot of collateral damage, would be my guess.
Now, is ETC an ERC20 token, or is it forked off of Ethereum in its own completely separate chain?
It's split off of Ethereum. I wouldn't say forked off because ETC continued the original chain and Ethereum implemented a hard fork that caused the split.
Interesting. Okay, so this would be like Ethereum now would almost be like the Bcash, and Ethereum Classic would be like the Bitcoin. Is kind of what you're saying in a way.
Yeah, in a way, I wouldn't call my friends at ETH Bcash.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of
yeah.
Examples that people can easily digest.
Yeah, ETC has much more of a Bitcoin vein to it, much more of a Bitcoin core beliefs type of vein to it, whereas ETH has a more experimental tech. Let's see how far we can push this type of approach, a more liberal conservative type of approach, basically.
Do you think some of the ambitions of Ethereum are realistic? Do you think? I mean, I heard you say you have friends there, and I don't want to push any buttons. I've heard some critics, educated academic individuals say they believe Vitalik intentionally is vague in his EIPs or his vision for Ethereum, uh, producing pathways that sound good, and you could say, all right, we're going to do this, and it's going to take 6 months to work on, but by the time we get there, this has happened. There are holdups, there's delays, and there's reasons why this really isn't a practical solution. And so that vague notion is what kept Ethereum going for 6 months. Now there's like some hopium left over to keep people streaming along. So, what's going on there? Do you have any thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, there's a lot going on with Ethereum to entirely keep track of, so I might not even be the best person to answer. But in general, I think that a lot of ways biting off more than they can chew, and that I don't think that anybody's doing it in any sort of malicious way. I think that they just think that their way is best, and I think my way is best. I think that they could definitely benefit from narrowing their focus, and Bitcoin, for example, is a great example. They essentially all settled on one single layer 2 type of protocol to move Bitcoins around faster when you don't want to use main chain. Whereas on Ethereum, there's 10 or 20 different ways to do it, and I think that type of thing long term may not work out too well. Yeah, but I don't think anybody's like intentionally trying to deceive people or mislead them. I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think it's better to just judge people by their actions rather than their motivations, because you can't truthfully tell anybody's motivations, even my own.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right. Um, dang, I had something, and I just lost it. But you do have a good point. Let's look at the writing on the wall. Let's see what can be done. Oh, here we are. All right, so we have a one of the things happening in Ethereum is you can't sync a node, right? It's like this. We have a blockchain that doesn't really have a block size. It kind of runs on a different thing, and like we can talk about blockchains with large blocks. And what happens is over time, the blockchain gets massive in terms of data space. Um, at a certain point, when you're trying to synchronize the blockchain, is there an issue, which I've seen people in Twitter talking about how they've been trying for months to sync a node and it's not working. Institutional investors that might want to sync a node can't do it. What's going on with that? What are the potential downsides of not being able to sync a node? What's the solution? Is that a space that's dangerous as we get closer and closer to the inability to synchronize a node?
Yeah, it's definitely super concerning, so much so that I've written an ECIP for Ethereum Classic, uh, specifically wanting to lower the gas limit.
Oh, that's what you're talking about from 10
Yeah,
to 8,
yeah, from 8 to 1. Uh,
from 8 to
so
1. Oh,
yeah, okay. So on Ethereum, and I think this is a misguided design decision, but the maximum block size was essentially left up to miners, or I think nodes might be able to enforce the maximum block size, but miners are able to vote within a certain range.
hmm
Um, and so, what every miner can do for every block they mine is they can vote that uh, block size or gas limit up a little bit or down a little bit. And when we get to too much gas, like we see right now at 8 million, it just makes the growth of the chain and the processing required to fully verify the chain go kind of parabolic.
yeah.
There's definitely misunderstandings there between full nodes and archive nodes, but even
Uh-huh.
full nodes are starting to become uh, prohibitively hard to sync. So it's not that they're impossible, but it's that I don't know. It took me about 7 days a few months ago, and I've been hearing from people that it takes even more time now to sync a full node. And archive nodes are becoming particularly hard to sync, and archives nodes aren't really different from full nodes, other than they store a ton more data. But both full nodes and archive nodes store the entire chain and can verify the entire chain.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, archive nodes in particular are for if you're running an Explorer or doing some sort of in-depth usage of the blockchain, then you might need the stuff that an archive node gives you. And those are at a point where it's just very, very hard to sync. And it's a major concern, and I don't understand why more people aren't concerned about it.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I don't really pay too much attention to Ethereum, and I'm worried about it, right? Because it's like the implications of failure to synchronize a node are massive. If you can't synchronize a node, like that rabbit hole goes very deep to me, and very centralizing, right? I mean,
well, it eventually becomes you have to take a snapshot at some point of the network and just
uh-huh.
trust everything from there on. Uh,
And there's no way to zip file or prune or whatever term. I'm not a technical specialist, so I don't know all the terminologies. But you know, like there's no way to turn the past blockchain into a smaller zip file, and synchronizing a node is therefore easier without compromising any security.
well, no, it's basically the amount of data you need to send isn't the concern. It's the amount of processing you need to do on the data. Uh,
Okay.
Bitcoin does
Uh,
what's mostly simple value transactions and a couple other neat things. Um, Ethereum-based chains, EVM-based chains do a substantially larger amount of work, um, and that's one of the issues that it comes with the nodes. Obviously, there's ways to avoid that, but right now on the Ethereum side, 8 million gas seems to just be continuing, and that's a concern. That's a concern for me on ETC. I can see the writing on the wall, and I don't want it to happen to ETC because
so
that's
let's
for
let
us.
All right, let you finish your sentence. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, no, that's it.
Okay, so for the people that are listening, we got a couple people that are listening. They're kind of enjoying the at work. They're at work and they're enjoying this talk.
Yeah.
For now, can we just briefly talk about gas? What is gas? What's the difference between a block size in Bitcoin, a block size cap, and gas?
Uh,
What is gas?
they're very similar in that both of them restrict the total size, the max size of any given block. On Bitcoin, you have block size or now block weight because essentially you just want to limit the total amount of data because you basically can process that data in polynomial time in a known kind of constant time.
Uh-huh.
Whereas on an EVM-based chain, since you allow so many other types of calculations to happen in any given transaction, you can't just weight the data. You have to weight the computation of the data instead. And so that's what gas is. Gas is weighting the computation of that data. I think if you were to compare if you're to compare the block sizes, you would probably be, is it? It's kind of hard to compare between the two, but I would say that in general, it's hard to compare between the two.
Yeah.
But in general, every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin blockchain adds about 1.8 to 2 megabytes of data now, thanks to the block weight and seg weight. And the Ethereum chain probably adds about 1.5 megabytes in that same amount of time worth of data in general. But that amount of, but that data needs to be processed far, far more.
Interesting. Okay. So we have this growing concern in Ethereum as far as synchronizing a node, and obviously that's a dark hole. We have Ethereum Classic, which remains proof of work, survived a 51% attack, lives to fight another day, and still is kicking. And I'm surprised no one's done it again. I'm surprised that this didn't happen again right away. If to me, if this was done for let's call the crypto space a war zone right now, okay? And let's say that I'm a Ethereum lover and I hate ETC, and I'm capable of switching my gear over real quick to mine the same algorithm but just on a different chain, and start attacking this chain, right? Well, why didn't they kill it? Do you have any thoughts about that? Like,
People try to ETC economically by selling their ETC because by the nature of the split, you had that much ETC. Literally about 3 million ETC were dumped inside of a week within one of ETC's first weeks of existence, which is something you don't ever see anywhere else. You didn't even see it after the Bcash forked off of BTC.
Yeah, 3 million is
animosity. You didn't see that level of dumping relative to the total coin supply.
Yeah.
And what was the wait? But the reason why people don't 51% attack all the time and don't double spend is also it's a crime. You're effectively writing a bad check. You're knowingly forging money essentially. So there's a risk to doing that, where there isn't a risk to doing more economic attacks by, say, substantially dumping ETC to try and crash the price or that type of thing.
So let's stick to the illegality portion, because I actually heard that this is a legal gray area. That
it's a legal gray area right now. I guarantee it's going to be illegal.
Okay, yeah. So
it's going to make people mad because the people who attack those two small exchanges and with the double spends, they returned a substantial portion of the money they got back. They got out of it, less their mining costs. So they got found out. Somebody figured out exactly who they were.
So the 51 attackers got busted, is what you're saying?
Yeah, they got busted in I guess non-judicial ways. But, yeah, long term, I could definitely see it. If you knowingly double spend on somebody, you're writing a bad check. You're forging money.
I mean, on a public blockchain, on a ledger, right? I guess it wouldn't be impossible to trace that a double spend.
Oh,
All the 49% would be validating the normal chain and processing the first payment, and then the owner of 51% attack would then double spend. So you would have what signature would be the same? Would it be the public address would be the same in two separate instances?
yeah, you'd have incontrovertible proof that this happened in multiple
Uh-huh.
ways. With
And
yeah, with the proof of work that they did, and with the signatures on two conflicting transactions.
And then if you can trace to whatever exchange they were doing it, which there's all kinds of block explorers and methods nowadays,
Yeah,
then you could find out. And most exchanges are KYC AML, so therefore identity is tied to a transaction. So yeah, I guess you could really interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I would personally, I'm not like a heist master, but I don't like loose ends. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be dumping this on on a AML KYC compliant exchange. Like, I would be
yeah.
figuring something else out. Maybe I don't know. I don't know every way to exploit this, but I'll tell you what, man, I would not get caught. And it seems like that was a very stupid move on their part.
It was 51% attacking change is pretty dumb. Um,
So, but there's currently a legal gray area. It's not illegal because,
it's not
it's not
illegal.
illegal right now because, and go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it.
It's not illegal right now because who knows what to do, right? This is a conflict of agreement of consensus, and how like in the blockchain space, how do you what's the legal foundation for anything like that? Now, obviously, this was theft, um, or double spending is in a way theft, and I'm sure that like there will be connections in the future. But for now, this is a pretty risk-free endeavor. Apparently, the guys got caught. Did they lose all their money? Did they? You said they paid most of it back or something?
Yeah, I guess somebody, I guess, knew who did this and was very upset about it.
Uh,
I would hazard a guess that it probably is actually illegal. It's just not been tried yet.
uh-huh.
Or I would imagine in most places that there's some sort of rule or law against knowingly receiving something that you can't make payment on, or that
Uh-huh.
you make payments on. Um, but
It's
I'm
a
not a
real,
lawyer, so I
yeah.
don't know for sure. But I would imagine that in most places you would be found guilty pretty easily.
I mean, it's definitely like not a good thing, right? I mean, if the law was parallel to morality, the morality behind a 51% attack is dark. It benefits one individual at the cost of many others in theory. Now, legally speaking, I'm not a lawyer and I can't say much, but I would think that a 51% attack is probably on the black side of the law, and dark side on the black market. So I'm curious. I don't think I'm not aware of any sort of legal movements in this direction. I don't know if the ETC people, the community it was outraged and were like, oh, let's hire Craig Wright's lawyer, and start suing everybody. But you know, we'll have to see on that one because how many 50? Obviously, you're not going to know off the top of your head, but this is the second one that I know of that the first one that I know of was Cannabis Coin, and that one got wrecked. Oh, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to keep talking. Looks like Anthony got sucked out for a second. There was a second there a while back. I can't remember the year. It was a couple years ago. Another coin called Cannabis Coin got hacked or 51% attacked, and it actually had similar things, parallels to the Ethereum Classic hack, where exchanges weren't conducting enough. They weren't doing enough confirmations in order to make sure that the cryptocurrency was actually yours and not able to be double spent. So what I saw was on that chart, and I can't pull it up right now. I might be able to at another point in time. It flash crashed to zero, and then it bounced right back up. Very similar to let's say what happened with Bitcoin during the Mt. Gox hack era, right? there was this flash crash. I think it went from $14 and change all the way down to maybe a penny or something like that. And I think it closed out back in a fair range. So 51% attacks are a little weird to me. And as a person in the crypto space, I was pretty convinced that 51% attacks were no joke, and it meant that a cryptocurrency can't survive in these stormy waters. But we're learning today that obviously that's not true, especially if there's a following. Um, and you cannot double spend someone else's money. The only thing you can do is if you own some of that crypto, what you can do is double spend that. You know, pay with a check and then go withdraw the money from your bank so that you have the $100 in your pocket that you and the goods or services that the $100 bought. So it's an interesting concept. The more interesting concept to me is that people aren't as threatened by this as I feel like they should be. Um, but obviously, Anthony had his beliefs as to why a 51% attack is bad, but not that bad. But still, really good content. I'm not 100% sure we're gonna get him back. Let me, anything can happen with electricity and internets and um, let me check. Let me see if I've received anything from him, email or anything like that. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Well, okay. His laptop battery died. Uh, if we can always bring him back on, and if anyone has questions, I mean, this was really insightful. I think this is always great to explore the space with an academic lens, learn a little bit, right? We all have a lot to learn, so always ask questions. I always look forward to your input and questions. Here to create a neutral learning environment. Obviously, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist, and I love to talk that point as well. So I'm always open to questions as to who, what, where, when, why. Joe Saz is a Bitcoin maximalist, so please feel free to ask me anything. Um, now I'm still Anthony's not coming back, I don't think. So let's call it a day. And yeah, it was a pleasure having you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm always here for you. Please hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on email, joe@blocktv.com, joe_saz, S-A-Z, on Twitter. Um, anything you guys want me to put together for you, I'm gonna do it. So, or I'm gonna at least try. Now we have a great lineup, and we're also gonna have Giacomo Zucco coming in tomorrow morning. We're going to discuss. I don't know if anyone was aware of the XRP video, the XRP discussion with Matt Hamilton, but I will be going over some counterpoints and Bitcoin maximalism with Giacomo Zucco tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I'll post it on Twitter. Everyone take care. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, please ask questions. Thank you for the support. Here for you guys. Block TV is going to produce a very neutral outlook in the space with a focus on academic discussions. Thank you so much for your time. Everyone have a great day.